8 reasons there's nothing worse than sore losers who think they still won. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and I was just looking at that video from BuzzFeed about manspreading. Oh. I know I'm a bit late to the party, but I avoided actually really looking at it because, well, obviously, but I noticed that it was published almost 2 weeks after the grand wizard of fourth wave feminism, Hillary Clinton, lost the election. And it got me thinking, there's really not a whole lot of more vile human behaviors than sore losers that are still somehow convinced that they won for whatever reason, even though they lost. Let's get into why. First and foremost, it shows you that you really have absolutely zero empathy and understanding towards your philosophical and political opponents. Sure, if you were fighting a war against a side that had tortured your family to death, I can understand why you might spit in a soldier's face when they capture you, hoping they'll just shoot you in the head and get it over with. But with a presidential election largely powered by what people refer to as the culture war within our own nation and even cities, which was basically fourth wave intersectional feminist social justice versus everything else besides Islam, who somehow was allies with fourth wave feminism, well, it's just rather pathetic to keep lashing out at men for the way they sit. I have an entire video about SJW projection, and it's really true in this instance especially, and they even admit it in the way that they describe quote-unquote man-spreading, but they are so lacking in awareness that they don't realize that they just basically admitted that they were projecting. You see, they proclaim that one of the core tenets of manspreading is that the guys don't even realize they are doing it, which somehow, in their twisted little imaginations, means that it is even more vile and oppressive towards women. You see, this all ties back to the conspiracy theory that we live in a patriarchy, in which absolutely everything every man ever does is designed to benefit men at the expense of women, including things that men aren't even aware of. But since anybody who isn't completely mental knows that that isn't true, the reverse becomes true with feminists when they project their things onto men. By fighting to stop things like manspreading or man-interrupting, which is when men interrupt people as opposed to when women interrupt people, these feminists end up actively oppressing men with their double standards. There was even a law passed in New York City against manspreading, and I think some guys actually got arrested for sitting on the subway in the wrong way for feminists. That all said, there are very few bits of illogic more ridiculous than continuing with these delusions about patriarchal sitting patterns on public transportation when men and every woman with common sense and decency in this nation has clearly said, enough of this bullshit. People should sit how is comfortable to them and make room for people when it's crowded. Weren't you raised by a person who's been on a bus? Reason number 2 that people shouldn't be convinced that they've won after they've lost is that it really shows people that they have a disregard for the rules of the game and a disregard for reality. This one is pretty obvious, so I won't get into it too much. When people were so harsh on Trump for claiming that maybe Clinton might rig the election, and then she turned around and just said that Trump must have rigged it and we should have a recount and contest it, it showed that the rules they fully well agreed upon and were advocating for, if it would allow them to win, were only important to them as long as these rules end with them winning. A friend of mine on Facebook was asking openly the electors to go rogue and put Clinton into office. So I said, oh, so that we can simultaneously start a civil war in our nation while also starting a war with Russia? His response was, that's better than Trump. That right there is the biggest denial of reality I can fathom. Sometimes you should stick to the rules and stick to reality. It will benefit you. The third pathetic thing that happens when people deny reality and think that they've still won even though they've lost is that they start bragging about losing, though maybe they don't see it that way. This one is extra funny to me. There was this one awful feminist that I once encountered who attempted to bully me on Facebook and call me a misogynist. She was successfully able to convince this tragically paranoid trans woman we were mutual friends with to unfriend me because I disagreed with her about some wording she considered inherently offensive, and I didn't think it was as bad as she claimed it was. It's not even something that I said. I was basically defending somebody else. So obviously I'm a horrible misogynist because reasons. I don't want to share her name because that might sound a bit like I'm now trying to bully her, but here's her picture. Isn't it kind of like when Sargon showed the picture of Stephanie Guthrie and he said, I know you're thinking to yourself, holy shit, she looks like a total cunt. More so, the thing is that she is a singer for a band, and I listened to it, and the band is actually pretty good. So she is really popular, even though she is a heinous fourth wave feminist C-U-N-T. I didn't say it, I just spelled it. But regardless, there's a point here, which is this. Apparently, she is such a bossy social tyrant of a goddamn C-U-N-T, which is not a term I almost ever use. This bossy tyrant of a lead singer from a band that's very popular, or at least has scared a bunch of people into liking her out of fear, that it seems like nobody will defy her. Probably because she bullies people she disagrees with and attempts to socially ostracize them by getting people to unfriend people she disagrees with the way she did to me. The reason I bring her up is this. Is there somebody in your life that you have such a distaste for that you can't help but to occasionally indulge in looking at what they're up to? This would be her, for me. Instead of checking out Christy Winter's YouTube channel or whatever, like I assume so many people do, I sometimes go look at this woman's timeline on Facebook because she posts like 5 times a day status updates, and since she's the queen of her little fourth wave feminist corner of the indie rock scene, so there's always a ton of responses to every status update that she makes. Clearly, I had to read her comments after the election, and it turned out to be every bit as fulfilling as I thought that it would be. She was saying that there are going to be literal Nazis in the White House and stuff like that. It was funny. But the best part was when the dudes who were commenting started chiming in. They were saying things like, I'm gonna get a t-shirt that says SJW on it. Seriously. And another guy even said, drum roll, I'm gonna get a t-shirt that says cuck on it. A guy actually said he wants to get a t-shirt that says cuck. It was fantastically funny, but also tragically tragic. These people are basically saying, we chose to follow a bitch-faced cunt as our Pied Piper, and she led us into a Trump presidency when we were attempting to be quote-unquote progressive. And now we're bragging about being cucks on her timeline. Good luck with that, guys. Okay, that was a long story. Reason number 4 that continuing to believe you should have won when you actually lost is pretty stupid is that it closes people off to making new friends. Here's the thing. When you lose at any sort of competition, you always have the opportunity to be a good sport about it and make friends with the person or people who beat you. I'm really good at ping pong, for example, and when somebody beats me, I am thrilled and I want to be able to play them more often, unless they're super crazy Jackie Chan good or something, and then it's kind of frustrating after a while, but I'd love to play Jackie Chan at least, 3 times. However, I've played a few people who had ping pong at their houses and beat them on their own table, only to have them get completely salty and rude to me for the rest of the evening. It's weird. Don't do things like that. People should accept that the non-SJWs and fourth wave feminists are really just on the right side of history, because we are. And that's why the SJWs lost this round of the culture war. Reason number 5 that thinking you still are right when you are obviously wrong is really awful behavior is that it gets people to start lying on a very large scale sometimes. All this talk about fake news coming from sources we already knew were lying, like the Washington Post, who is just full of crap and has been this whole election season. And other people are saying Russia's behind everything. And then other people are saying Clinton didn't do nothing. She didn't do nothing. While simultaneously, people are talking about how Trump is incredibly corrupt and maybe trying to run a business through the White House, which is not a good thing. I don't approve of that, and I believe maybe that might be true, but the Clinton Foundation was just some super squeaky clean charity, I bet. Need I really say more? It was just released that supposedly the CIA has evidence that Russian hackers did collude with the Trump campaign to get him elected. I really wonder what that evidence really is. If you didn't see my video from a few days ago, I was banned on Facebook for 30 days for making a joke saying that I am a Russian hacker bot designed to destroy Hillary Clinton, but the only reason I made that joke is that I was accused of being a Russian hacker bot by some random guy a few days prior when I was posting on a friend's timeline, who is a woman that I had met in person about 8 years ago at a CD release show of mine. I figured it was a funny joke because some people actually believe that there are Russian hacker bots all over Facebook or something, and one of them even thought I was one of them because I was talking smack about the Washington Post. But I didn't realize I would get banned from Facebook for 30 days for making a joke because that's just mental. Now I'm slightly worried that the CIA is going to come try to mess with me or something, like they're digging through my email accounts or something. But I don't know if they really believe that. Reason number 6 that people should admit it when they've lost is that not doing so inspires people to repeat the same actions that had them losing in the first place. The Democratic Party nominations for 2020 are basically more of the same that we tried last time. And they are apparently continuing to bash Bernie Sanders and try to say, he's fucking a white male. Furthermore, instead of unblocking Trump supporters on social media and attempting to get to know them better, regressive leftists are just proceeding with the same Black Lives Matter style protest activism which failed them in the first place. I really have never been so proud to have never went to a single Black Lives Matter protest, even though I was massively peer pressured to do it and actually supported the beginnings of the movement. Or so I thought. Reason number 7 to admit that you and your own ideas lost is something I talk about all the time and have a whole video on, which is called starving piranha syndrome. You see, when SJWs begin to eat each other, I think deep down they know they've lost, but they still think they themselves as an individual was correct the whole time, somehow. So instead of trying to think collectively about what each person might have done wrong, including personal introspection, they'll instead just blame everybody around them. It wasn't my fault for calling my cousin a dude bro on Facebook and then blocking him when he said that feminists on his campus were oppressive by protesting Christina Hoff Sommers' lectures. No, it's all Cynthia's fault because she has thin privilege and she attempted to try to reason with people who like Milo Yiannopoulos, only to expose more people to his lectures by drawing attention to them on Facebook in her comments. If Cynthia had just blocked all of those dude bros instead of engaging with them, we would be on the right side of history sooner. The future is still female. Hillary for president in 2020. The 8th reason to admit when you have lost is that although it can be painful, admitting you are entirely wrong about something is one of the most important growing experiences a person can have. I would know because it's happened to me several times. Now, granted, I'm the kind of person that when I'm confronted with irrefutable evidence that I was wrong about something, I generally admit it to myself very quickly if I'm not abusing substances, which has happened. George W. Bush getting elected for a second time was the biggest moment for me, because many people still believe that the first election was stolen, and I am one of them, so I assumed that he wouldn't get elected again because he stole the election the first time. Boy, was I wrong. And I realized it immediately and spent the next years of my life learning about politics and being engaged in political discussions. A lot of them with Republican voting people. I was trying to figure out what happened on a cultural level. That was the first time in my life where I really began to understand politics, and I was able to use my background in theater, media studies, and various cultural studies to relate what I was learning by talking to Republican voters. And I was able to relate that to a broader understanding of what was going on in American politics. To put it in a less pretentious way, I already knew how culture worked pretty well, and I was finally able to figure out politics on a cultural level, at least to a certain degree, as a result of finding out how wrong I was about what was going on across America. Sure, I was just a 23-year-old kid, so I wasn't all that great at doing all this stuff, and I made a lot of mistakes. Instead of always being open to better listening, I insulted more people than I can count, and I shouldn't have always done that. But I will give myself credit for the fact that I was constantly pushing myself to learn more and more, instead of just stomping my feet and insisting that I was right the whole time and that Bush stole the election again or something. I suppose maybe some of the kids these days will snap out of it. And it can't be a moment too soon. Drop me a comment and stay tuned.